one thing that is quite interesting, like you say, a lot of comedy clubs and a lot of comedy promoters across the country, like they really say, what the hell are you doing, London, like with all these bringer gigs? So maybe to sort of help with the issue of that, like what advice do you have for comedy clubs so they can keep an audience coming in, so they build a community and they come in, so they don't think, oh, I can't get people in and I have to do a bringer gig?
I think there are, I mean, I say London seems to be very different. I've run 4 or 5 times, I've tried running gigs in London and none of them have ever worked. So London seems to be a bit of a different kettle of fish to the rest of the country. But I mean, most of the places I go are places with ready audiences already. So I think one of the most important things, if you're trying to find a gig to run somewhere, is go somewhere that's already popular, that does events. So if you've got, I think it's good if you go to a pub or somewhere that already does tribute bands, live music. If they're known for live events and they've maybe got their own Facebook groups already for live events, it's much easier to get them into a comedy night than if you go somewhere that's maybe not a particularly popular place or that doesn't do live events otherwise. You need to go somewhere where the regular clientele of that place are the type of people you'd want to have in a comedy night. Because then if you can get the people that maybe drink in the pub to go upstairs into your function room, it's a hell of a lot easier to get them to do that than it is to try and bring an audience into a pub they maybe don't know already. People are creatures of habit. It's much harder to get them to go to a venue they don't know than it is to get them to go up into an upstairs room of a pub they already frequent. So I think finding the right venue makes it much easier to attract an audience. But for me, the biggest thing about a successful night is repeat business. If you have a really, really good night, people will come back. And what I do at a lot of my bigger clubs is I do a £2 discount if they book on the night for the following month. And some nights I get 2/3 of the audience will book for the following month because they know it's a great show. And also they don't care who's on because they know it's always going to be a good show. So if you put a good lineup on, they'll keep coming back to it. But obviously also at open mic level, if you're going to do an open mic sort of show, you've got to put on good open mic acts. You've got to look at the videos. If you just put your mates on, whether they're good or not, you're going to have a bad show. I mean, if you're putting 7 or 8 acts on, you've got to make sure that at least 5 of them are going to be good. You know, people will tolerate on a cheap night 1 or 2 acts dying, but if 5 or 6 die, it's going to be a terrible night that no one wants to come back to. And if they're just there as hostages because to support their mate and everyone's terrible, it's going to be an awful night that no one wants to come back to. So, you know, really, I would say try and set up a gig. You know, get a couple of acts on that maybe are new that will bring some friends along, but don't force them to do it. And get, you know, 4 or 5 acts that are good and get a headliner on that's decent. So even if it means, I mean, in London, you can get a good headliner for, you know, 30 quid or something. But just make sure the night ends on a high with a strong 15 or 20 minute act to close it. So even if you've had a couple of deaths, the night ends on a high. But if you put like 15 acts on doing 5 minutes and 10 of them are terrible, God, it's going to be an insufferable night. No one will come back to it.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I've been through many of them. And it's one, I mean, being a promoter must be extra hard as well, especially if you're hosting, because you have the pressure of it. Like if it doesn't go bad, if it goes badly and you're hosting, it's your fault. And also it's so much hard work sometimes when someone bombs to lift it back up. But
yeah, I mean, this is the thing with a gong show. I mean, my gong shows, I give everyone a 2 minutes grace. So they get a chance to establish themselves. But if an act's terrible, they'll get gonged off and, you know, you get all the music to energize the room a bit. But if an act is going for 5 or 10 minutes with no gong and they're getting no laughs, it can absolutely sap the energy out of the room. So, I mean, I think the gongs are a much better way of doing it because they're entertaining for the audience, even if quite a few of the acts aren't very good. You know, the gonging and the audience feel engaged because they get to vote. I think it's a much better way of doing it because you get an audience, you know, yeah, you know, some acts will have travelled a fair way and only get 2 minutes, but they're getting 2 minutes in front of a proper comedy audience. You know, most of our gong shows have got 50 people in them that are keen and enthusiastic. And usually at our gongs, at least half the acts make it through the 5 minutes. So it's a good show. Audiences always say they enjoy it. And, you know, you can give stage time to 15 people. So if you run it well and make it fair, don't, you know, the Comedy Store is an institution, and, you know, that, but I don't think anyone else should be running gong shows like that. You know, I think you need to support new acts and give them a chance. But you've got to make it entertaining for the audience as well, giving them, everyone, you know, 5 or 10 minutes stage time and then, you know, sucking the energy out of the room if they're not very good. It's not entertainment. You've got to balance between giving the acts, you know, some stage time, some quality stage time to quality audience, but making it entertaining. That's why I think, you know, a fair and friendly gong show is a good balance.